In May 2013, 32-year-old Tim Bosma decided to sell his pickup truck. He lived a quiet life in Hamilton, Ontario, with his wife and young daughter, and posted the ad online on Kijiji. On the evening of May 6th, two men arrived at his home on foot. Tim told his wife he would be right back as he climbed into the truck. The vehicle drove away and never returned. Tim's disappearance sparked a massive search and a flood of media attention. His wife, Charlene, made several emotional appeals to the public, begging for any information that would bring her husband home. Investigators tracked the burner phone used to contact Tim and reviewed statements from other sellers who had met with the suspects earlier that week. Witnesses remembered a specific detail. One of the men had the word ambition tattooed inside a box on his wrist. The mundane transaction had left behind a physical signature. Police in a neighboring jurisdiction recognized the description, pointing investigators toward a suspect who lived a life of extreme wealth. Dellen Millard was the heir to an aviation empire. At 14, he set a world record for flying a helicopter and a plane solo. He owned millions of dollars in real estate, including luxury condos and a 100-acre farm. His accomplice was Mark Smich, a man with a record for petty offenses who lived in Millard's basement. Together, they spent their nights on what Millard called missions, thefts of construction equipment and vehicles carried out for the sake of the experience. Millard had the financial means to purchase any vehicle he wanted. To him, the theft of Tim Bosma's truck was an escalation of these nighttime missions, rather than a crime committed for profit. His wealth provided him with resources typical criminals lacked. He had access to private aircraft hangars and remote land, giving him the space to operate away from public view. Following Millard's arrest, police raided his rural farm in Ayr, Ontario. Hidden inside a trailer on the property, they found Tim Bosma's truck, which had already been partially stripped. In a nearby field, they discovered an industrial animal incinerator Millard had purchased for thousands of dollars. Forensic teams examined the interior of the unit and found Tim Bosma's remains. Lead detective Mike Carbone noted the systematic nature of the disposal. The use of a commercial incinerator and the calculated preparation suggested this was a method the killers had used before. The discovery changed the scope of the case. It was no longer a singular investigation into a missing person, but a search through Millard's past to see if other disappearances had been overlooked. Investigators looked back to July 2012, when 23-year-old Laura Babcock vanished. She had been involved in a complicated social circle with Millard, and her ex-boyfriend had repeatedly tried to get police to investigate his involvement. At the time, Toronto police labeled her disappearance Level 1, a designation used for missing persons where foul play is not suspected. They did not pursue a production order for her phone records, even though her final calls were to Millard. Months after Laura vanished, Millard's father, Wayne, was found dead in his bed. He had been shot through the eye. The death was ruled a suicide within 2 days, and the file was closed. Detective Carbone discovered that the revolver found at the scene had been swabbed for DNA, but the samples were never sent for testing. When he finally ordered the analysis, the results showed Dellen Millard's DNA on the handle, not his father's. The assumptions made during those earlier investigations, dismissing a transient young woman and a businessman's apparent suicide, meant Millard remained free to continue his missions for another year. Millard had worked to destroy physical evidence, but his phone contained a digital record of his activities. Thousands of photos and text messages provided the timeline investigators had previously lacked. Among those files was a photo taken inside the incinerator shortly after Laura Babcock vanished. While the image was pixelated and dark, forensic experts testified that the shapes inside were human bones, providing the link needed to charge Millard with her murder. The 5-year investigation ended with Millard being convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder. He was handed consecutive life sentences, ensuring he would likely spend the rest of his life in prison. These convictions brought a measure of resolution, but they also left a difficult question. If the deaths of Laura or Wayne had been investigated thoroughly the first time, would Tim Bosma still be alive? Millard had the money and the properties to hide his crimes, but his desire to document them provided the evidence that led to his arrest. His own records became the definitive proof of what happened. Tell us what you think of this case in the comments.